The floor of the station shook so hard that my teeth rattled, and I heard the scream of metal bending somewhere above my head before I heard the alarm. Red light poured through the corridor. A voice on the speakers said the outer ring had lost pressure and that everyone near Section 9 needed to move now. I was in Section 9. My name is Elena Voss, and until that moment the worst thing that had happened to me that week was being told, in front of a room full of people, that my body was too broad, too heavy, too strong to be considered fine among my own kind. In the next 60 seconds, I stopped thinking about that entirely, because a support beam the length of a transport shuttle came down across the exit doorway, and a boy no older than 10 was trapped underneath the edge of it, screaming for his mother. I did not think. I ran toward the beam instead of away from it, which is what my training told me never to do, and which is what every safety officer on that station would have shouted at me to stop doing if any of them had still been standing close enough to shout. The beam was pinning the boy's leg against a fallen support column. Sparks fell from a cut cable above us like burning rain. I planted my feet, wrapped both arms under the lowest edge of the beam, and pulled upward with everything my shoulders had ever been mocked for carrying. It did not move at first. My arms burned, my knees locked. Somewhere behind me, a woman was shouting my name, telling me to leave it, that the whole ceiling was about to come down, that I would die under there with the boy if I did not move. I ignored her. I thought of nothing except the boy's face, white with pain, and the 6 inches of space I needed to open between the beam and the column, so his mother, who had just reached us, could drag him free. The beam lifted. Not far, not gracefully, but it lifted, and the mother pulled her son out from under it with a sound that was half a sob and half a shout of relief, and I dropped the beam the instant his foot cleared the edge, staggering back as it crashed down again in the space where his leg had been a heartbeat earlier. That was when I saw him. A human man, standing at the far end of the corridor with a fire suppression unit slung over one shoulder, staring at me like he had just watched something he did not have words for yet. His name, I would learn within the hour, was Daniel Hart, a trade engineer assigned to our station to help repair the very systems that had just failed around us. He did not say anything in that moment. He simply nodded once, like he was filing something away, and then he was moving past me toward the next corridor, shouting for anyone else still trapped to call out. The next 20 minutes were the longest of my life. Section 9 had 11 people in it when the pressure failure hit, and every single one of them needed to be found, freed, or carried out before the automatic bulkhead sealed the section for good, which the ship's systems told us, in a calm and terrible voice, would happen in 18 minutes. I lost count of how many times I put my shoulder under something heavy. A collapsed shelving unit pinning an old man's arm. A door frame that had folded inward and needed to be forced apart by hand so 2 children could crawl through the gap. A length of piping, still hissing with escaping gas, that had to be dragged clear of a walkway before anyone could pass safely. Every time, my body did what my people had spent years telling me it was wrong for doing. It held weight. It did not tire when it should have. It kept me upright when panic would have put anyone else on the floor. Daniel worked beside me for most of it, though I did not notice at first how often our paths kept crossing. He was fast and clever with the tools he carried, cutting through a jammed lock in seconds where I would have needed to pry it apart with my hands. Where I gave strength, he gave precision, and somewhere in the chaos of that section, without either of us saying a word about it, we became a team that moved through the wreckage faster than either of us could have alone. With 4 minutes left before the bulkhead sealed, we found the last person, a young woman named Clara who worked in the station's kitchens, pinned beneath an overturned storage rack in a side room neither of us had checked yet. Daniel reached her first and tried to lift the rack himself, but it did not move, not even an inch, and I watched his face change from determination to something closer to fear as the countdown on the wall display dropped below 3 minutes. I did not wait to be asked. I got beside him, set my hands where his were not, and together we heaved the rack sideways just far enough for Clara to slide free. Her arm bruised but not broken. Daniel half carried her, and I half carried both of them, out through the last open corridor as the bulkhead behind us groaned and began its final closing sequence. We cleared the threshold with seconds to spare, and the heavy door sealed shut behind us with a sound like a held breath finally released. For a moment, none of us spoke. We simply stood there, breathing hard, surrounded by the people we had pulled out of that section, while the emergency lights blinked from red to a softer amber that meant the immediate danger had passed. Someone started crying with relief. Someone else laughed, the kind of laugh that only comes after fear has nowhere left to go. I sat down on the cold floor because my legs finally admitted how much I had asked of them, and it was only then, in that quiet after the storm, that I noticed how badly my hands were shaking. Daniel sat down next to me without asking. The the same way he had at the assembly wall weeks earlier, close enough to matter, far enough to be polite. He did not say anything about the beam or the rack or the 20 minutes we had just survived. Instead, he looked at my hands, still trembling in my lap, and he took one of them gently in both of his, not to stop the shaking, but simply to let me know he had noticed. "You saved that boy's life," he said, "and the old man, and Clara. You saved all of them." "Anyone would have tried," I said, though we both knew that was not entirely true. Most people on that station could not have lifted that beam even with every ounce of will they had. "Anyone would have tried," he agreed. "Not everyone could have done it." I looked down at my own arms, streaked with dust and a thin line of blood from a cut I did not remember getting, and for the first time in my life, I did not see the shape my aunt called wrong. I saw the shape that had just carried 11 people out of a collapsing section of a space station, one at a time, without stopping, without breaking, without asking whether my body was allowed to be this strong. Word of what happened in Section 9 spread through the station faster than the repair crews could patch the hull. By evening, people I had never spoken to before were stopping me in the corridors to thank me. Some of them the very same people who, weeks earlier, might have looked away from a body like mine without a second thought. My aunt found me outside the medical bay, where I had gone to have the cut on my arm properly treated, and for a long moment she simply stood there, studying me like she was seeing something new. "They are saying you carried a beam that 3 men could not lift," she said. "I did not count how many men it would have taken," I said. "I only knew someone was under it." She did not apologize, not in words, not that evening. But she reached out and touched my shoulder, the same shoulder she had once called too broad to be graceful, and she left her hand there, a moment longer than she needed to before she walked away. It was not everything. It was not the 6,000 years of poetry rewriting itself in a single day, but it was something, and I decided that evening to let it be enough for now. Daniel found me again later, sitting on a bench in the observation deck where the stars stretched out in a slow, silent river beyond the reinforced glass. He brought 2 cups of something warm from the kitchen, handed one to me, and sat down without needing an invitation, which by then had become something like a habit between us. "Back home," he said, "after something like today, people would call you a hero, not because of what you look like, because of what you did with what you have." "On my world," I said, "they would still find a way to call it strange. A strange shape doing a useful thing." "Then your world has not caught up to what it already has in front of it," he said. "I watched you lift a beam today that should not have been liftable. I watched you do it twice more after that, with people who were terrified and running out of time. I did not see anything wrong with you today, Elena. I saw someone who was exactly built for the moment we were in. That is not strange. That is remarkable." I did not have an answer ready for that, so I simply let the silence sit between us for a while, watching the stars move past the glass in their slow, patient way, the same way they had moved past that glass long before the station existed, and would keep moving long after both of us were gone. It was strange, I thought, how a single day could hold both the worst kind of fear and the first quiet feeling of being seen clearly by someone else. In the weeks that followed, the station rebuilt what the pressure failure had broken, section by section, wall by wall. I rebuilt something too, though it happened more slowly and without any visible scaffolding. I stopped folding my shoulders down when I walked into a room. I stopped measuring myself against a shape I had never had and was never going to have. Not because one compliment from one man had fixed 26 years of quiet shame, because that is not how healing actually works, but because that day in Section 9 had shown me, in a way no words ever could, exactly what my body was capable of when it mattered most. Sella, the cousin's rival who had mocked me at the assembly, never said another unkind word to me after that, though I do not know if that came from genuine respect or simple caution. Either way, I found I no longer needed her opinion of me to be different in order to feel differently about myself. Daniel stayed on the station longer than his original assignment required, officially to help finish the repairs, though we both understood, without ever needing to say it aloud, that the repairs were not the only reason. We spent our evenings on that same observation deck, watching the same slow river of stars, talking about his world and mine, about all the small and large ways 2 very different peoples had learned to measure worth. He never once tried to convince me that Threll beauty standards were wrong on their own terms. He simply showed me, again and again, in small moments and large ones, that there was more than one way to measure what made a person worth admiring, and that strength, real strength, the kind that lifts a beam off a trapped child without stopping to ask permission, would always matter more to him than the narrow shape of a spine or the width of a shoulder. I still carry the shape my aunt once called wrong. I carry it through corridors I once walked with my head down, and I carry it toward whatever comes next for me and for Daniel. A future neither of us has fully mapped out yet, but one we have both quietly agreed we would like to find together. My people spent 6,000 years writing poems about reeds bending gracefully in the wind. I have decided I would rather be the beam that holds the roof up when the storm finally comes, and for the first time in my life, I am no longer ashamed to be exactly that.